Earl Who Broke the Sea, Chapter 4, Part 2, which is the top of page 27. Top of page 27. If I was reading it correctly, the batteries in one of the accommodation units were low, and the fusion reactor needed extra cooling water to compensate. I glanced at Holden. Surely he could see it. I'm not exactly an A student, but we'd been shown the basics at the training centre, and it was pretty clearly laid out. Psst, I whispered. Hey! Holden cast me an indignant look. He really wasn't much older than me. Hey, Holden! I whispered again. I knew I should leave it alone. Mum was anxious enough already, without me causing trouble on my first day. But growing up with Dad had given me a knack for these things, and the information was blindingly obvious. I traced the system diagram back through to make sure I hadn't made a mistake. No, no mistake. An orange light blinked on, confirming my suspicion. Holden stared at it for a moment, befuddled. Holden, you need to... Holden flashed me a mean stare. I pressed on. You need to adjust valve 172B. Holden had actually turned away. Valve 172B blinked rapidly, practically begging to be pushed. What if I did nothing, I thought. A blackout, probably. I knew enough from our sessions at the training centre to figure out that from our sessions, failsafe would probably trip out somewhere once the load got too high. But I didn't like the sound of 20 minutes standing in pitch black, waiting for them to reboot the affected systems. And if I could stop it happening, that would be good, right? It would definitely reassure Mum that I was doing my best to make things work out down here. It might even help her relax a little bit. Mum, I whispered. Mum! Mum was deep in conversation with a tall, snub-nosed man who I presumed to be Carter Elbricht. I turned back to the schematic. Holden! I hissed. He was deliberately ignoring me. He had to be. My patience snapped. A hot gust of emotion caught me and I swept me forward. Maybe it was because of the long journey. Maybe it was the anxiety of being down here, of everything being different and terrifying. I knew I was right about the valve. Holden was clearly being an ass, and all I had to do was tap the damn switch. Lily! Mum's shriek sounded like a whale that had fallen into a blender. I froze, my hand awkwardly close to the control interface, so there was no way I could deny what I'd been planning to do. I drew my hand back and slipped it into my pocket. That's probably a good idea. Carter's voice was rough but smooth and unnaturally gravelly. He walked over to me stiffly, a mean-spirited action man in an expensive-looking suit. Not unless you're planning to adjust the coolant flow to our fusion reactor. He smiled wildly, slowly, and placed his hand on my shoulder. It was all I could do to resist biting his finger. I'm Carter, he said, his tone superficially friendly, but shot through with steel. Tyrant with a smile. You must be Lily. I say, make yourself at home, but you appear to be doing that already. Holden had turned and watched us now, his eyes smiling, the little git. I'm so sorry, Mum said, sounding mortified. Lily can be a little... She let the words hang in the air. I could be a little... what? It certainly wasn't going to be anything good. I rejoined us. He leaned over at the screen beside Holden to adjust valve 172B. I knew vaguely from our time in Newfoundland that although Carter was the overall manager, Harry held the authority when it came to the technical operations of the rig. He gave me a quizzical look, and I thought for a moment he was going to tell me I'd been right about the valve all along, but then another flashing indicator caught his eye and the moment passed. Things might be more relaxed in academia, but we have to follow rigorous procedures here, Carter said, his icy blue eyes watching me. The rig is a very dangerous place, suitable only for approachly trained personnel. I stared back at him. His suit jacket was pulled taut, over gym-tightened muscles, like he was some kind of nightclub bouncer. A suit jacket? Everyone else on the rig was forced to wear a flight suit for safety reasons, but clearly Carter considered himself special. If he were a user interface, I thought, what would he be? Some kind of high-tech weapons system, a laser-guided missile perhaps. I could feel him judging me, packing me into a neat little box in his head and labelling me troublemaker. If I lost the eyeliner, managed to stop biting my nails and stood a little straighter, would people look at me differently? I wondered. No, it was still sure through. Carter had me pegged as a troublemaker, and the fact that he was probably right only made me more annoyed. Now, where were we? He said, turning back to Mum. As I was saying, I'm sorry that you've had a wasted journey, but the position for you which you've been hired is no longer available. You should have been notified topside. He gave Mum a condescending look. Innocent error, I imagine, but we will of course offer you compensation for your time. I'm afraid I don't understand, Mum said. I have a contract. The contract that brought you here has been nullified, Mrs. Fawcett. Dr. Fawcett, Mum corrected him automatically. I'm sorry, Dr. Fawcett, Carter said, making it sound like no kind of apology. Dr. Maximus Clark, the rig's science officer, explicitly requested my assistance, Mum continued. Maximus Clark is dead, Dr. Fawcett. Somehow, the library quiet of the command centre grew even more intense. Holden and the other technicians turned and watched us keenly, the way you watch a seal that had been cornered by a killer whale. Mum made a choking sound, and her hand rose to her mouth. She sat heavily in a nearby swivel chair, tears welling in her eyes. Don't cry, I thought desperately. Not in front of him. I didn't want Carter to see her upset, and I knew she wouldn't want it either. Mum didn't like crying. She always said crying just doesn't do any good. She drew a short breath and composed herself. Well, how did it happen? She asked in a voice that was almost steady. Good, I thought. Good for you. Please? Carter gestured her to follow over to the big cluster of domed windows. I followed too. The command centre was slung beneath the main rig like an egg sac on a spider, extending over the edge of the valley. On the other side of the glass, sorry, aluminium external floodlights rejected off the murky water through the haziness. I could just make out the jagged line of rock dropping away, falling, and then rising again, and then dropping abruptly into blackness. I felt myself wobble, made dizzy by the drop. Deeper still, I could see the dim red glow of the telemetry grid, the 50-kilometre square lattice of homing beacons that the crabs used to navigate when they harvested the polymetal nodules the rig had been built to collect. 2 weeks ago, Dr. Maximus Clark took an unauthorised EVA in a company-owned submersible. Carter broke off and smiled, revealing teeth that looked like a row of gleaming bullets. That means extravehicular activity, he explained, a fancy way of saying he'd left the rig. I know what EVA stands for, Mum replied tersely. He descended 75 metres in depth and 5 kilometres laterally in that direction, towards the east. Carter continued. He pointed out into the greyness, his voice flat and devoid of all emotion. At this point, the telemetry went dead. Our rescue team has been unable to find any sign of him. Mum shook her head disbelievingly. Surely there's something you can do. We've searched, Dr. Fawcett. Believe me, our team spent hours combing every foot of that part of the ocean. There's nothing. Have you notified the police? There will need to be an investigation. Surely it's some kind of procedure. Carter looked gravely at her, a slight patronising curl in his lips. It's natural that you don't appreciate how different things are down here, Dr. Fawcett. It's not like being topside. We manage our own investigations, and the police get notified of the results. Everyone down here understands the risks that come with a job. He held out his arms in a gesture of defeat. The ocean is a big place, and the currents are hungry. I'm sure I sound callous to you, but Maximus would be the first to agree, wherever he is. He's long dead by now. I have quarters to meet. That's the end of chapter 4. We'll resume chapter 5 next time. Don't forget there are questions on the sheets that have been provided.